The Hamas regime is a very evil regime. 2 years ago they've been planning this for years, to infiltrate Israel during the feast of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, while all the communities who live here in communal living like farms, during that holiday they go to their dining hall. All the families, all the parents, all the kids are in one room. So they were planning to infiltrate Israel territory by digging underground tunnels. Coming into the kibbutzes, grabbing as many and killing as many kids and Jewish people as possible, grabbing who they ever can grab, alive preferably, and taking them as hostages into the Gaza Strip. Why? Psychological terror. It gives you more fear and more trepidation than a bomb. When they have your loved ones as hostages for years, they intimidate you constantly. We had a soldier called Gilad Shalit who was captured patrolling with his battalion. They dragged him, they kept him as a prisoner for 5 years. They kept him alive for 5 years. Benjamin Netanyahu negotiated with the Hamas government, released 1,200 prisoners with blood on their hands, some of them. That's how much worth we value a Jewish soul. Many of those people who were released have been put back into prison because they've gone back into their old ways. You can't stop them. Some of them were deported to other countries, but right in front of us, what we see the Gaza Strip. Right? There is agricultural land now that belongs to the state of Israel. Israel farmers. You'll see a moshav down there. That's Israel. To my left, you'll see a tower, which is a military base. Down here, you see the new buildings right here. There's a tower. That is Ashkelon. It's a Jewish community right on the beach. Very beautiful. Very prosperous.
Philistine city.
Very close. Yes, it was a Philistine city. Same with Ashdod. So the Gaza Strip, right, another Philistine city. All what we see here is a small, narrow strip of land all the way down to the Sinai. This is Hamas territory. This is the land that they want to possess in order to wipe us out. And now, if you went into a home over here, you'd walk into the bathrooms, you'd open the cupboards to look for some soap and toilet paper, you would find a false bottom floor. You lift that up, you'll see a tunnel going down several floors. You go down to the tunnel, it'd be another tunnel going several kilometers into Israel territory. This was done multiple times. All the concrete that we gave to build the schools, homes, hospitals, went to build terrorist tunnels. These tunnels are sophisticated with lights, with air, with ammunition, right? With communication. And they're still doing it today. So Israel is monitoring them 24/7. They are detecting what they're doing. They're observing what goes in through the Egypt border, because they're smuggling a lot of weapons and a lot of materials, and a lot of terrorists who are teaching them how to build these weapons, how to train their soldiers. And the soldiers are going out towards Iran, towards Iraq, even to North Korea. North Korean bomb builders are training the Iranians and training the Hamas people. So the strip of land is beautiful, coastal land. They're restricted to go out to a certain distance, and they have a blockage to bring boats and goods in from the sea. So you can feel it's very peaceful now. It's quite beautiful. But their mandate is to continue to bomb. They're planning for the next war. They're preparing themselves for the next war. And that is their focus, that is their mission. Not to build schools, not to educate their kids, but to destroy and terrorize the Jewish people, the nation of Israel. Okay, you'll see over here, you'll see some towers, right, with smoke coming out. That's Ashkelon's power plant, electrical power plant. This electrical power plant feeds electricity for all the civilians, everyone in the Hamas Strip, the Gaza Strip. Everyone gets their power from Israel. Even during the war, we gave them power. Even when during the war, we sent food and supplies in there. And what happened when the soldiers went in? They had secret tunnels dug underneath. They were waiting as the soldiers passed. They would come out and they would attack and kill from behind. That's a strategy they used. And they grabbed some soldiers. We have some soldiers now, still their bodies are in the Gaza Strip. They're probably more likely dead because we haven't received living proof. Obviously we think that they're dead. But they have at least 2 or 3 soldiers. You don't hear it in the news. And they're holding these soldiers as hostages. And these families are suffering. They're suffering. They want their sons back. They want to bury them. And so this is where we stand today. Are there any questions? David, do you want to mention something?
There are many proxy terrorist organizations in the Middle East. When I say proxy, I mean terrorist organizations that are supported by major nations. 2 of the most well-known are Hamas and Hezbollah. Both seek the destruction of Israel. Hamas is primarily located here in the Gaza Strip, although there are in other locations as well. And Hezbollah is at the northern end of Israel in Lebanon. So both of those terrorist organizations seek Israel's destruction. One, Hezbollah, is financed by the government of Iran. So that's in the north of Israel in Lebanon, where Iran funds Hezbollah as a proxy terrorist organization on their behalf and at their behest. Hamas receives its funding from a group called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood really started a long time ago back in Egypt. They sought to overthrow the government of Egypt. A lot of what was happening during the so-called Arab Spring over the past years was tied to the work of the Muslim Brotherhood. There was a flip in government in Egypt back and forth. The Muslim Brotherhood put their guy in power, and then it flipped back again, and the Muslim Brotherhood were kind of pushed out of power in Egypt. Today they're out of power in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood also have been strong in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia pushed them out because, again, they're a shadow Islamic radical group under the guise of humanitarianism, of goodwill, of trying to come together, but there is a very radical faction of the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's primarily what drives them. Saudi Arabia also kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood set up shop in the neighboring tiny little country of Qatar, which is on the Persian Gulf, a very wealthy nation. Doha is the city in Qatar, Qatar, and Qatar just happens to share the largest natural gas reserves in the world with Iran in the Persian Gulf, the waterway that separates Qatar and Iran. They share this natural gas reserve, one of the largest in the world, in the Persian Gulf. Qatar has been funding Hamas because the Muslim Brotherhood's headquarters got pushed out of Saudi Arabia into the tiny nation of Qatar. So during the war with Israel, Qatar was funding Hamas terrorism against Israel. And at the same time, America has wonderful relations with Qatar because of economics and other factors. Meanwhile, all along, Qatar has been funding Hamas. Now, Saudi Arabia, the larger guy on the block, put pressure on Qatar a couple years ago to say, we also want the Muslim Brotherhood out of here. Now, this doesn't mean that Saudi Arabia isn't sympathetic to the cause of Islam. Quite the contrary, it's spreading it around the world. But Saudi Arabia, the monarchy that runs Saudi Arabia, did not want this undercurrent, this shadow government of Muslim Brotherhood factions to be within its own country. So they pushed them to Qatar, and now they put pressure on Qatar to say, get the Muslim Brotherhood out of the Arabian Peninsula altogether, out of Qatar, out of the Persian Gulf region. And where do you think the Muslim Brotherhood headquarters moved to? Turkey. Turkey, Istanbul and Ankara, Turkey. So the Muslim Brotherhood are located now headquarters by invitation from Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is the leader, the president of Turkey. He is becoming more antagonistic in his speech towards Israel. And one of the issues, one of the things that started this, not because it was a real justification, it was an excuse for Erdogan to come against Israel and to vocally condemn Israel, was a ship that was sent from Turkey to try to come against a blockade that Israel had, because Israel doesn't want terrorists setting up right here in Gaza on its border. Israel was supplying Gaza with the necessary things that it needed, concrete, which they used instead of building schools and roads. They built it to build tunnels to come in and to terrorize Israelis. Israel was giving them water, giving them power. But there was a naval blockade so that only certain supplies could come into a designated port in Israel. Israel could make sure that everything was kosher, everything was good on those ships with the supplies, and that there were no guns coming in or weapons coming in. And Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey said, no, that's not good enough. I'm going to send a ship down here to push through the blockade. And Israel knew what was happening. It became an international incident. Israel actually sent troops in to board and to keep that ship from trying to come through the naval blockade, because in theory it was bringing supplies and weaponry to the terrorists here in Gaza. And there was a big international incident. There were people that were killed, and everyone condemned Israel for it without any context whatsoever in terms of what was going on. And Erdogan of Turkey used that as his excuse to really start the war of words against Israel. And that has continued over the last 5 to 7 years. And relations between Israel and Turkey are at a modern times low. And that will continue. And Erdogan continues to threaten from Turkey. I strongly urge you to watch Turkey carefully. Keep an eye on Turkey. I think they're going to play a very significant role in Bible prophecy. I think the Antichrist is going to come out of that region, whether it's Turkey, northern Syria, northern Iraq, that region, the ancient Assyrian Empire, I believe is where the Antichrist will come out of. But the reason that Erdogan did what he did in terms of supporting Hamas, remember, Muslim Brotherhood moved their headquarters to Turkey. Erdogan supports the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood supports Hamas against Israel. And Erdogan wants to ingratiate himself as the leader of the entire Muslim Arab world. A lot of Muslims throughout this whole region look to Turkey as the shining example of what Islam can do for a nation, economically, powerfully, militarily, and so on. And Erdogan wants to be that ruler that steps up, and he takes the title of Khalifa or Sultan. He wants to be a new Sultan. He wants to rule the region, and he wants to reestablish the Ottoman Turkish Caliphate. When I say Ottoman Turkish Caliphate, how many of you know the time period or the general time period of the Ottoman Turkish Caliphate? Okay, approximately 1517 to 1917, 400 years. The Ottoman Turkish Empire ruled most of this whole region, most of the Middle East. It's not that far gone, far removed from our lives, but we typically don't know very much about it. The Ottoman Turkish Empire ruled most of the Middle East, including this area, including much of Syria, of course what is today modern-day Turkey, and also they controlled Mecca in Saudi Arabia, all the way down the Red Sea, and down to Egypt as well. It is Turkey's goal today to reestablish their caliphate, a conglomeration of nations, of Arab Muslim nations, that will come together, and the glue that holds them all together is Islam. And he wants to be the leader of that grouping of nations, and that ties in very significantly with what the Bible has to say about the end times. So I just wanted to give you a sense of how Gaza connects to everything that is going on in the region, and Erdogan chose that, number one, because he's pro-Muslim Brotherhood, and number two, because the rest of the Arab world says, yeah, Erdogan's standing up for those poor, oppressed people in Gaza who are shelling Israeli farm communities 5, 6, 7, 8,000 rockets, and the world says nothing. And Israel finally says, you know what, enough is enough. We have to go in, we have to root this out. And then all of a sudden the world screams, oh, it's disproportional response. In other words, you have rockets coming in, and they show one rocket that hits in the ground somewhere in a field, And then they show tanks of Israel going in to root out the terrorists, and they say, look, it's disproportional. Look at those terrible Israelis attacking those poor Gazans over there. And the reality is then they come into a point where they say moral equivalence. Well, both sides have problems. Both sides are doing bad things. Moral equivalence. That's a cop-out, and it's not true. The reality is, if we had thousands of rockets coming into Texas from Mexico, do you think we'd stand by and say, well, you know, a few thousand more maybe we'll let you get away with, and then we'll finally do something? No. If there were rockets coming into Texas from Mexico, we'd go in and root it out, and we wouldn't worry about disproportionality. We'd go in and take care of the issue. At least we should.
We're not building tunnels into the Gaza Strip to steal families and bring them into Israel for hostages. But these people who live there, they're being terrorized by Hamas. They have no choice. If they stand up and speak, they're dead. And there's a Christian community in Gaza. There's Christians there. And there was a Christian who ran the Bible Society, who had a wife who was pregnant, had a son. He was murdered. He was just left in the streets. And nobody investigated it. Nobody said who's to blame. They just covered it over.
And it's important. It's important to say it's easy to throw everybody who lives over there into the same pot, and it's not true. There are decent people who just want to raise their families and live a life, and they have pressure put on them to not say anything, to not resist by the terrorists that are living over there. So we should be praying for the people that are over there as well. There are many multitudes of people who are caught in a terrible situation, and they're exploited, and it's tragic that that happens.
I'll give you an example. The head of Hamas, the last war, his granddaughter of a couple of years old had a rare disease. And the doctors and the institutions couldn't help her. And Israel says, bring her here, we'll help her. Our doors are open, we'll send an ambulance all the way to our hospitals. We have experts waiting to help her. No. Last minute, they sent her, she came, she got the best treatment, it was too late. She died. Who do you think got the blame for it? Do you see, this is the inhumane, disproportional evaluation we get put on ourselves. But that said, do you want to add something?
Not a thing.
Great. Well, how about...
Not a thing, except in those tunnels, I want them to get a picture of it. You mentioned they had air, they need that because they were long, they had to have air. They also had electricity and lighting. Some of them were big enough, wide enough for motorcycles to drive through, come out on the other side with automatic weapons and start shooting people. I don't think these were just little...
And a lot of kids have been
tunnels
killed,
that they recruit on.
12, 8, 10. These are the ones who are building them. They're forced laborers. They are building and digging these tunnels. These kids who should be at school. And a lot of times you won't hear it. The tunnel collapses. Kids died. We'll dig around them. You know, that's what they do. You know, that's the sort of people that are there. And they suffer because they have no choice. They have to submit or die. They can't leave.